is where we discuss the possibilities.
Hey guys, I'm Dr. Kori Probst, health psychologist and wellness director at the Diet Doc, and I'm here with Dr. Joe Klemczewski, founder of the Diet Doc. Welcome back to the Diet Doc Life Mastery Podcast. Good morning, Joe.
Hey, Kori.
This is episode number 60.
60 is getting up there.
Kind of exciting. Well, guys, in our previous episode 59, please go back and listen to that if you haven't already, because this is going to be a follow-up. What we discussed is the concept of I want to eat like a normal person. This is something that Joe and I both hear a lot throughout our work with clients. And we're looking at it from the perspective of moving from food fear to food freedom. And at the end of the previous podcast, what we discussed is this four-legged stool concept that we can ground ourselves in to really have a process of increasing awareness to be able to move out of this shame-based way of eating and viewing our bodies and living in accordance with the rules of other people or other entities, and getting to know ourselves and trusting ourselves to make appropriate and wise and skillful decisions around our health and fitness. So I thought what we could do today, Joe, is dive into the first leg of the stool, which is macronutrients. And 4 legs, just to review, guys, they all start with an M because it's cool to have alliteration in things. They are macronutrients, metabolism, mindfulness, and moralization. Okay, so Joe, I'm going to ask you this first. When coming from the Diet Doc himself, when you think about macronutrients, what comes to mind?
Well, I go back to just a sense of knowing or accountability, perhaps. You've got a measuring stick, and I mean that's how our brains think of things in terms of comparison. So if I know how many macronutrients I had today coming from protein, for example, well, that fits into a context. How many did I have yesterday? What is my goal? How many should I have? And so there's always this comparative analysis. And if you don't have something objective, you can't compare it. The problem is that creates a continuum of, absolute legalistic rule setting rigidity versus total anarchy and freedom. And a lot of people are pulled to one side of that dichotomy, but we really have to find some place nearer the middle and then floating back and forth depending on our goals and the context, even just meal to meal.
Yeah, the 2 words that stand out for me that you said multiple times were comparison and context. And the context matters when we're talking about personal choice and autonomy and being able to make wise, skillful decisions for ourselves. Context is key. I know I'm going to make a different decision in this context than I am in this context or with this person as compared to that person. In terms of comparison, this is where I feel like we get into a lot of trouble, especially when we're comparing and we're doing it in a very black and white, right, wrong, always, never sort of way, when we're comparing how we do things with how other people do things. Comparison doesn't necessarily have to be negative. It can be very positive if we're going into it from a curious standpoint and from a discovery standpoint, but I don't think most of us do that. When we get into comparison mode, it's, oh, I must be doing that wrong. or, oh, I should do what that person is doing, right? And that really begins to create that sense of wrongness and sense of shame and sense of guilt. And then we start questioning what's really important to us. And maybe our values need to be in line with what that person believes. So the other thing I wanted to see outside of nutrition, what does the word macro mean and what does the word nutrient mean? And this is how I want everyone listening to start looking at their lives. Macro means from a larger perspective, right? It means large scale, overall. Nutrient means it's a substance that provides nourishment that's essential for life, maintenance of life, growth, and development. So if we get away from what's right or wrong and proteins, carbs, and fats and what we should or should not be eating, if we look at the whole of life and begin to ask ourselves some sometimes pretty difficult questions like, what is important to me? What do I like to eat? And in episode 59, you asked her, like, well, what maybe is if someone came to you, Kori, and said, I want to eat like a normal person, what's the next thing you would do? Or what's the next thing you would say? And I expressed that it would be important for me to get an understanding, because it's going to be important for that person to get an understanding of what that means to them. So looking at what would you do if we were doing this from the perspective of growth and life and development and what's important to you on a larger scale, not just what food you're putting in your mouth, but how are you nourishing yourself from all perspectives, relationally, physically, intellectually, developmentally, spiritually, physiologically, all of the different ways. So that leg of the stool is much more, yes, there's nutrition, that's important, but it's more about nourishing our entire lives from all perspectives. And the other thing that you said, we have to have a context in order to compare what's going to be most appropriate for us. That involves education. So we need education to build some level of nutritional competence, right? But that doesn't mean that what this one person says is the right thing is going to be right also for me. And we have to have the ability to be curious, be open-minded, and not just take it at face value and latch onto and grab onto and grasp onto the very first thing that anyone says is a good idea. Is this resonating? Is it making sense?
Yeah, everything in nutrition in my mind right now grids down to structured flexibility, the way I've been describing this for years, because there's a backlash. You know, we created flexible dieting 25 years ago in my early writing and practice with clients. So a quarter of a century ago, this movement hits the industry. And now, of course, like everything else, it goes to a polar opposite swing. And so now you see people moving back to things like time restricted eating, where it's like these absolute rigid rules. You follow this. Ketogenic dieting is back on a rise. So I like that the term anarchy popped into my brain as you were giving the introduction, because that's obviously an extreme part of the opposite continuum, but it means what you said, that you're constantly open-minded. You're looking for something. You're looking for the rules to potentially be wrong.
Right.
And it reminds me, not too long ago, a psychiatrist won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for discovering and perfecting frontal lobe lobotomies. Mm-hmm. So that was an accepted practice. Hundreds of thousands of people lost the front of their brains because somebody said, hey, this seems like a good idea. And that became accepted dogma. And in nutrition, it's no different. Obviously, not quite as much at stake, but we've got to look at those things that are important and create stability for us. But you also have to be open-minded enough that you're going to question things and look for ways to break the rules in a way that's helpful to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like what you just said, because I can't tell you how many clients I have who come in to see me, and it is just all, and I have rules. I do. We keep coming back to it's the energy surrounding the language that we use that's going to make the biggest difference. When I say I have rules, like, I can say that with positivity. I can say that with optimism, because these rules help me put together the structure that feels best for me. My clients come in with rules. Rigid, destructive, energy robbing, principles that they haven't questioned whether they're right for them. So I think that coming back to the word freedom, in my mind, freedom, it becomes integrated into our lives when we're able to ask ourselves, what's important to me? And it's a question that I ask myself all the time. Is this important to me? Why is it important to me? Is this important to me because it's always been important to me and I haven't questioned it in a long time? Is it important to me because someone told me it should be important to me? Are these words in my mind that came from me and that I deliberately and consciously think about, or are they words from other people? I'm working with a woman right now who, what did she said to me the other day? She said, time of death for my competition prep. She listed the time and the date and a smiley face. And what we talked about during our session was how and where this weight number came from that she was attempting to reach, and who said that was the weight she needed to weigh. And she couldn't say that I chose that. No, it was a coach who said, this is the number I think would be good. And it was the number that she latched onto and that she's been striving for years and has never necessarily been able to reach. And this isn't about competence in dieting, competence in food restriction, competence in managing macros. This is this even appropriate for my body? Is this actually a weight that I feel energized at, that I feel vital at, that I have enough food flexibility at in order to be social and go out to eat and be with my friends and not be worrying and feeling guilty the entire time? Is this the weight that allows me to go into the gym and actually enjoy training and not feel guilty about not doing certain things in the gym or having to do certain amounts of quote unquote cardio? And I could get on a whole nother rant about cardio itself. Yes, there's cardio exercise, but I have so many clients who, and this is again, let's look at it from a macro perspective, who say, I have to go do cardio now. And I'm like, why? Why do you have to go do cardio? Can you go do something fun and move your body? It's going to be the same thing.
Or just say, I get to go do cardio. I've scheduled my day to allow me to do this thing, which is aligned with my goals. Yay me, instead of I have to.
Yes, so that language change and the energy change, I have a client right now who changed it to movement. I'm going to go do my fun movement for the day. And she did it at a time when typically she'd come home and sit on the couch because she's just that tired. So macro level perspective, is there a different way that I can begin to look at this? What language am I using? Macro level perspective. Is this is this essential, and is it inspiring my growth and development and maintenance of life? And when I think of life, I'm thinking of, like, I think of the color green, and I think of movement and vitality and action. Most of what we're talking about and these food fears and shaming and guilt that's involved in what we're supposed to look like and how we're supposed to eat, that's not life-giving. It's not life-producing.
So let me pull the macro perspective back down into macronutrients, because I'm gonna put my anarchy hat back on and say that if you have a diet plan, and maybe this was given to you by a consultant, and they say, okay, you need this many macronutrients per day divided up this way. Well, again, our brains move to these neat little containers. Oh, I need this much of this in this amount of time, this day. But let's broaden that out on a bigger scale. The average person might eat about 500,000 calories in a year. I did that math in my head when you were talking. Sorry.
And I'm just nodding like, yeah, sounds good. I'm not even going to try.
So about 500,000 calories in a year. Well, who's to say that in this 24-hour period that your clinician or your diet plan or even you completely nailed down the minute differences day to day in your metabolic activity and needs? So what if your goal was, let's say, 200 carbohydrates today, 200 grams of carbs,
okay,
but you got 225.
Yep.
Well, tomorrow, could you do 175 and the world would keep spinning and life would be grand? I mean, of course. But that's why we look at the overall analytics over time. So instead of looking at everything like, oh, I screwed up that meal or I screwed up that day. Well, you know, who gives a shit? Look at the whole week. Look at the whole month. Look at the whole year and keep it in that macro perspective.
Yes, I totally agree. So when I look at macronutrient ranges, which is what we're talking about now, I look at them as guidelines. And I'm big on cycling right now, so I'm going to use the lines on the road as an analogy. I can ride on the line, I can ride outside the line, or I can ride inside the line and right in the middle of the lane. The same thing goes with macronutrient ranges. There is no absolute right or wrong, and now we come back to context. It always comes back to context. If I'm riding my bike and there's a whole bunch of traffic, but there's no shoulder, guess what? I'm going to ride in the middle of the lane, right in front of the car in front of me, so that person can see me. So I can move left or right. There's a continuum there that's going to be appropriate based on the situation, the circumstances. And I think because this is something that that clients have a lot of difficulty with. You get a number and you have to meet that number spot on. No, you don't. Because there are other factors that come into play, like, are you actually hungry? What is your body telling you right now physiologically when you tune into it? What's it saying? If you're not hungry and you've got macros left over for the day, are you going to stuff food in your face just because you have room? Why would you do that? Again, macro level perspective, it means there are lots of dots that have to be considered and connected in some way in order to facilitate the best, most appropriate step for you in that moment.
In the last two thoughts you and I both spoke through, think of what we're discussing. It's eating like a normal person and freedom. I mean, how much more freeing can it be to say, okay, I've got these rules and they're appropriate. They're what I want to keep me in bounds. but that doesn't mean I'm going to ride off the cliff if I miss something by just a little bit. And so, I use the term in the last podcast being pro-social. I'm not going to let a food goal or a number on a piece of paper keep me from living a complete, whole, full life in terms of what I want in a different context, like you said, or with other people around me, when I can just make those little adjustments later in the day or the next day. Why would I chain myself to some arbitrary concept that prevents me from living a fuller, more authentic life with other people?
Agreed, completely. And I think it's important to recognize that for individuals who have lived in that space for a long time, who have lived in that prison, who have felt chained down by these very rigid, restrictive rules, it's going to take some level of practice to begin instituting that little bit of flexibility and laxity, because that can be tremendously scary. What we mentioned in the previous podcast was that when you haven't felt like you've had any freedom, and when you have felt chained for so long to doing things a certain way, or you were wrong, to have complete flexibility then, and to be told, well, you have complete freedom, go and eat whatever you want, and no food is bad. While that's a truth, no food is necessarily bad. When you look at the beliefs that underlie their current actions, to move from very staunch to now there's zero rigidity, it's like now it's completely out of control. And they have felt controlled for so long. So we're giving you steps, guys, and this is just one of 4 to begin looking at the situation from a different perspective.
Yep, and this does tie. Everything we're talking about comes back to our opening episode, which was on the moralization of food. So when you say something like "no food is bad," of course I agree with that. But it might be better linguistics to say, well, this is a better food for this goal or this context, or maybe even amount. You used the example yesterday of eating, popcorn in a movie theater. Well, popcorn is not bad, and maybe even for my goals, it's not the best thing, but maybe half a cup or a cup is okay. Yeah. So again, there are just different layers when you talk about the moralization of anything. And I'll come back to what you said, where context is absolutely king.
So to conclude, I think I just want to say that thank you for correcting me when I said no food is bad, because there are certain foods that I would absolutely choose not to eat, Joe. I don't look at them as bad, but it comes down to personal choice and what feels inspiring and nourishing for me based on what is important to me. And I've done the work and continue to do the work. As you said yesterday, maybe Kori needs some therapy. Of reflecting upon what is important to me, because if there's any universal truth, it's that everything changes. I continue to change, you continue to change, our beliefs will continue to change and evolve and grow and adapt. And so, yeah, now we're getting into where I want to go with the whole mindfulness leg of the stool, but I think that's kind of a good place to wrap it up for today. Do you have any final comments?
I do. I'm going to correct you in that I did not correct you earlier. I was agreeing with you that there is no food that's bad, but with something that is not bad, there still is maybe a different way to use it. So definitely not correcting you. I agree 100%. And guys, we're gonna roll off with this, moving into mindset and how mindfulness and mindset fits into food freedom. So the expert Dr. Kori Probst, health psychologist, is going to continue guiding us through this series.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks, guys.